Welcome to Shared Insights, the podcast from BA Insight. My name is Pete Wright, and I am joined today by our very own CTO, Chief Customer Officer, Sean Coleman. How you doing, Sean?
I'm doing great, Pete. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited about our conversation today. We've got a bit of some news. Hopefully, we're going to reflect on a little bit here. We're talking more about AI and cognitive search, building off of some of the other conversations we've had recently. Today, we're going to talk about ServiceNow. If you haven't used ServiceNow, you don't have it installed on your end in your enterprise, you've probably used it somewhere if you've ever had to entertain a digital workflow. So we're going to be talking about what is a digital workflow, where does ServiceNow fit into the overall digital economy, and how can you make your experience with ServiceNow better with a little bit of cognitive search, thanks to BA Insight. Does that about sum up what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, I think it does. I think you started with the right thing. I'd be surprised. Most everybody out there is probably, if they're not aware of ServiceNow, they're probably, they're using it in some way. It's really kind of caught on, kind of become ubiquitous, right? Used in a lot of companies. And we deal with a lot of customers that have ServiceNow. And that kind of started the conversations, right? Where people were, hey, we've got this kind of great workflow tool that we're really putting a lot of different workflows in there. And it kind of like there was groundswell that built, right? So you started hearing about them a little bit, and then you hear about them a little bit more. And they were starting on the IT service management side, and they expanded into the HR. And now it's pretty much, if you've got any workflow stuff going on, they've got a really great platform to do that. And I think people continue to see the market embrace them. If just recently, as recent as last week, there was a strategic partnership announced between Microsoft and ServiceNow, which is exciting on a lot of levels, especially for us, right? Since we deal with a lot of Microsoft customers, we work tightly with Microsoft on all their search information. So seeing them get tighter with ServiceNow views that as a, kind of a yes, this is part of a larger IT footprint that we have to deal with, right? So sometimes Microsoft likes to pretend that other competitors aren't there, or not even competitors, but other technologies not there, but not in this case. So they're embracing ServiceNow. They're actually going to use ServiceNow internally. Great win for those guys. And so, I think what we look at and what we try to focus on, or really think about how can we help, is if you just take a step back and look at ServiceNow as a platform for driving kind of employee experiences and employee engagement, right? So that's kind of the underlying message that I think ServiceNow and people in that industry are sending, which is, hey, we're going to digitize workflows, sure. But in the end of the day, what we're going to use that for is we're going to use that for making employees more engaged, making employees happier, easier to do their job. And that flows right into what we've been saying, which is in order for an employee to be able to do their job and be happy in doing it, man, they got to find the information. So let's make sure that from an AI search perspective, we're giving them access to the data they need when they need it, so that they can solve the problem and not get frustrated. So to me, it goes hand in hand: digitize workflows, finding information.
Well, and it seems like there is, just as you talk about it, the gap that is implied between what ServiceNow allows you to do in the present tense in engaging customers. Before we get into some examples, at what point do you realize that there's a gap between that present tense engagement and the past tense access to everything that we've created before that might relate to this present tense engagement? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think that's what people are seeing. If you think about just the life cycle of something like this, right? So you start out with, I've got a lot of processes that are inefficient. I'm going to bring efficiency. I'm going to bring a platform behind those, right? ServiceNow is likely that platform. And I'm going to make that process efficient. I'm going to make it so that it's very, it's easy for us to see how many people are in that process, where they're at in that process, right? Where they're getting stuck and how I deal with them, right? But what happens is that you can provide them what you think the right answer is, right? So you can provide some supporting documentation. You can provide guidance into that digital workflow. But they still may get stuck, and they still likely do get stuck on who do I ask about this? Or is there some other information out there? Or actually this workflow has me solving the problem. So now I'm responsible for getting it from the step C to step D, right? How do I do that? How do I do that as effective as I can? So yeah, the easier you make the workflow progress, it kind of hones in more on where those problem points are. And I think what we've seen is those problem points always come up when the answer to what they're looking for is somewhere else. And you don't know where, right?
Yeah,
we just say
right.
it forever. We don't know where it is, right? But it's somewhere else. And I think that's the problem that we're trying to solve, or that's the problem that we're at least trying to talk about, right? Let people know that, hey, there likely is this problem out there that you have. Your digitized workflows are going great, right? You're seeing massive improvement on what it used to take to do that. And a lot of times what you've done is you've taken a complicated IT process or a complicated HR process and you've streamlined for those people. But when you drop the employees in that process, like the people who were overseeing the process before, great, they've got all the reporting they need. But you still may run into that problem when the employees get in there that they can't actually find what they need to move themselves from step to step. And so how do you one, predict that, and two, interject an answer for that so that it almost solves their problem before they know they have it, which obviously is what we're talking about, which is AI driven search. Let me predict what you're going to have and try to solve it for you before you get to it.
So even if you are invested in this world of, workflows, I think it can be challenging to talk about, the examples that where AI search might be able to fill that gap. So you wanted to walk through some example scenarios in which a workflow circumstance exists and how AI can help augment that experience.
Yeah, and I think it's always good to break it back down into examples, right? So to me that's the big problem that we have a lot of times is we say, hey, AI driven search is going to solve all your problems, and somebody goes, well, tell me exactly how it's going to solve my problem.
Yeah.
And I go, well, let me understand your situation, right? So that's what I tried to do is think up, a few top level examples that maybe will resonate with some people. So first one that came to mind was, if you look at ServiceNow and I'm going to start on the employee side, right? So let's talk a little bit about, employee engagement, and keeping people engaged, right? So I think I read, there was a recent statistic, I think McKinsey put it together, that employees are spending about 20% of their time looking for information and another 14% of their time communicating and collaborating. So they're either looking for something or they're asking somebody about it or they're communicating about it, right? So if you think, okay, I got 34% of the time that's going on. So let's kind of drill in on that and look at an HR executive, an HR executive who now has digitized workflows going for his training process, his performance processes, his benefits processes, right? All of these things that he's got going on, he's probably still spending a lot of his time trying to find information around those, right? So how are they going? And he probably gets a report in ServiceNow that says that you've got 1,000 employees in the training workflow, and 95% of them are on step C, and 6% of them are on step B. But what he's really worried about is, okay, how are we, they're at that step, but are they happily at that step? Are they frustrated at that step? Are they moving around? Are they dropping out and coming back in? Some of the things that are more contextual into what you're doing, right? So not a specific data point of how many people are at what place, but what other things are they doing around that maybe would help me, right? So here's the problem where we get into, well, that information is in another system, right? So what can AI-driven search do for him at that point, him or her at that point, right? So what we can do is we know the employees that are in that workflow, and we know the other systems that they talk about, that they use, right? So maybe we're a Yammer company. Maybe there's Yammer discussions going on. And I've got employees that have to do yearly training. They've got to do security training. They've got to do all this kind of stuff. Well, wouldn't it be great if while I'm looking at my training workflow, the AI-driven search says, oh, that he's looking at the security training. Let me go out to Yammer I'm going to run a search against these employees, and I'm going to come back and say, 30% of the people out there that are talking about certification retraining are talking about it in a negative connotation, right? Let's look at sentiment of how people are talking to each other, right? Or 60% of the people are talking about it in a, hey, that was super easy this year. Man, ServiceNow or this new workflow tool made it a lot better. So that's context around that workflow that would be very hard to just go, unless he just went to Yammer, him or her went to Yammer and just read through it and try to get an idea. Well, it sounds like people say it's going good. What AI-driven search can do is, because it can index things like Yammer, and because it can do analytical processing of what's being said, it can aggregate that up and say, generally, your employees are favorable about this. Generally, they're not favorable about this, right? So now I've got both sides of the coin. I know that my workflow is working because I've got the metrics of how many people entered, how long it took them to get through, and how many people exited. But I've got right there in that same pane of glass, I've got the AI-driven search popping up and saying, oh, by the way, positive connotation in the company about this, right? People are talking about it in Teams, or talking about it in Yammer. There's documents about it, those type of things that we've looked at, and from sentiment, we can tell that it's good or it's bad, right? And that can apply to a lot of places, right? So you do, let's go to like a performance management, right? So you're working with people on performance, you're setting goals. And some of the goals that you've set for them, right? You've gone through that process, you've set the goals, that your managers have had all of their monthly check-ins, right? You see it because you've digitized the workflow and you got the data. But what's the ripple effect of that performance goal, right? So if you know that in a support team, one of the performance metrics that group is going after is building a better knowledge base, right? So they're into ServiceNow and they're like, hey, we got 100 articles. Man, wouldn't it be great if we got 1,000 articles? Well, the workflow doesn't necessarily, from a performance standpoint, doesn't focus on, it tells you, did you go through the performance process? And you did. But did the outcome of that, where are the people in that, right? How are they doing in what I've targeted them to? So if you can bring it together and then offer to your managers, oh, hey, by the way, not only can we tell you how your downline is handling working with your team on performance, but we can see the connection to the increase in document contribution, the increase in communication around this team, the increase in whatever performance aspect you created for them. We can actually tie them together and bring that data in and show it to people. And then tie it back in and say, well, are people talking about it negatively or are they talking about it positively? Not only did you tell them that we want to build our knowledge base, they actually went and did it because you had 100 articles and now we have 1,000 articles. But then in Yammer, they talked about how easy it was, which now what I'm looking at is not only am I managing the workflow efficiently, I'm getting the performance out of the team, but I've got engagement at a positive level and better engaged employees or happier employees, more effective. So I think that bringing in that type of data is that kind of next level view of the world that we see AI-driven search bringing in for this HR exec.
It sounds so much like, one of the huge benefits that we can't underscore enough is that you see it all in the same pane of glass, as you say, right? This allows you to get context that has been heretofore very challenging to achieve.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And if you think about it, if you step back and just go to, hey, I'm an HR exec, anything that gives me a better idea about, certainly, like I said, making sure your processes are efficient. Yes, right. Table stakes. Like everybody's got to do that. If you're not efficient, you're not going to win. But once you're efficient, are your employees engaged and satisfied? I think there was Gallup. Gallup did a poll, I think it was from 2018, that said that only one third of the 100 million employees they polled said that they were engaged at work. 51% were not engaged, and then the other 16% were actively disengaged. And actively disengaged is actually almost negative, right? Because those actively disengaged people cause other people to be disengaged, right?
Right.
So looking at it in a way of, man, I need to get that 1/3 of engaged employees to 2/3. What could I do as an HR exec? if I could show that over a year, I took that number from 1/3 to even a half, right? I didn't spend any more money, right? I didn't go out and hire a bunch of people. What I did was take the people that we had and make them happier at work, which makes them more efficient, right? Which makes the whole company more efficient, right? So, win-win across the board, right?
You want to walk us through another example, maybe another employee-focused example?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. So if we flip off of an HR executive, let's say, okay, well, I don't have a ton of those, right? So am I gonna, maybe I've got a whiz-bang HR exec and I don't need that type of help. He's got, he or she's got that stuff nailed. Well, you got a bunch of employees, and those employees are doing a bunch of things. So let's keep in the HR space and let's talk about, benefits enrollment. Every single person, every year, does benefits enrollment. If you've built that process into ServiceNow, you've probably got it nailed, right? It's going to take them step 1, step 2, step 3, right? They're going to know what their options are, all that type of stuff. But there's external information that you can put in their hands that are going to make them happier about that process and be able to complete it. Like, so I can use me for an example, right? We have a number of health plans available. And if you've dug into health plans recently, it's like, okay, I got this deductible, I got that, I got this. Well, what, and I'm married, I got a couple kids.
Yeah, right.
Boy, it would be great to know if there's, what are other people that has anyone else used this plan, and is it positive, is it negative, right? So if I'm on a plan and right there beside it popped up with a, hey, Sean, here's some discussions that are going on in Yammer right now or in Slack right now about the particular plan you're looking at. Now, it's not a document about it, it's not this, but it's real fellow coworkers that I've got sharing their experiences. Well, that's going to be great, right? I can look at that and go, wow, I know Bob and he said this worked great for him, and it was a little cheaper than this other one and he saved some money. Well, that's awesome. Or maybe a very helpful fellow employee built a spreadsheet, and they said, hey, for myself, I built this spreadsheet and I did it to analyze the 401k options. Do I go Roth? Do I go traditional? Do I put a percent here, percent there? What about the match? Right. And that's a bunch of math, and I'm not great at math, but I got to, here, Steve, who I know over in, finance, he put a spreadsheet together that he used and he tossed it on SharePoint, right? And just shared it out there. Well, Steve probably didn't email everyone and told him he did it. He just told the people that are around the group. But now the AI-driven search found that document, right? Saw that it got used, understand what it's about, and it can offer it up to me while I'm in context with it and say, you may find this helpful. Here's a spreadsheet that Steve wrote that, deals with how to calculate the right 401k options for you.
Even the HR manager in the last example is going to be prioritizing how useful this is.
Right.
This is amazing.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
and that's what it is. There's you can't hit on enough. There's so much locked away knowledge out there that if you can get to it and you can index it and you can cross-reference, that's the trick, right? So I'm in ServiceNow, I'm looking at something, and that's what the integration has to do. And that's what our integration does. It looks at what you're at, where you're in context, and then goes out there and finds people, documents, conversations, things like that, and offers them over to you, right? So you can imagine, that employee, that person before, that basically every time he got to one of those decision processes, these are big decisions. What am I going to do for my retirement? What am I going to do for my health insurance? Right? Big decisions that they're making. And if they don't feel like they've got the right information, they're frustrated. Then they're unhappy, right? And then they got to go get on a customer call, and maybe they're not as nice, right? So it's like ripple effect.
Well, frustrated, and it takes a long time, right? It just takes a long time to get through this thing. And like the last thing you want, HR, IT, whatever, the last thing you want is people to be spending 4 hours a day thinking about and driving through this process.
Absolutely. Yep. So anything we can do to drive information to them, regardless of the systems it's in, I think is the key message here. So as an employee, right, we want you to be engaged. We don't want you to be that group that's actively disengaged. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to help you find stuff and help you get answers faster. So I think it's a good example, right?
You want to bring it into IT? Talk to us a little bit about IT teams?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So let's think about another thing that likely is being used. So IT departments were probably the first. That's where ServiceNow focused first, right? So hey, you've got an IT group and they've got some ticket, they've got service that they're providing to employees. You've got projects that you're managing. So let's digitize those workflows. So we see a lot of people that come in and say, great, I was able to I put my project through the funding process. That was smooth, right? I got my POs approved. I got my money. I put it through procurement. I bought my software, right? I've got that going. We went through all that process. The digitized process worked great, but now I actually have to go execute this, right?
Yeah.
So what do I do now? So I've got to put a cross-functional team together. I've got to communicate with certain vendors, right? So I bought a piece of software from somebody who's they're headquartered on the West Coast. I've got a UI vendor that's out in New York. So I've got to now execute on this project, and I've got to assemble a team. So let's think about what AI-driven search can do here. It can look at those type of things and provide you more of like an expertise view of the world. So I'm not looking for content, but I'm looking for people, right? So it knows that you've got a project, it knows that you've got funding, it knows based on the procurement processes where you bought it from. It knows from a project planning perspective, from an allocation, and it can start offering up people, right? So it can look at projects that people have done before. It can look at skill databases. It can look at locations, right? And then, not only will it offer you people up that may work, it can provide you a great interface to go in and saying what's most important is that they've worked on this software before, or what's most important is that they're in the same time zone or in the same city, so I can put somebody on site if I need to. So almost like a Amazon shopping experience for people where you got all the filters and you're finding everybody and it's suggesting one and saying, hey, this other person is very similar to this guy. This girl may get what you're looking for here because they worked on a similar project. So that type of view of bringing the best people together to complete that task, if you think about what extra knowledge you'll get looking for people when it goes to all the other systems that we've got and aggregates that for you, how much more efficient you can be at doing something like that.
Yeah, how beautiful it is that you were presented this menu as soon as you finish that core sort of, ServiceNow process to get everything approved. And then what a gift to see all the resources in one place. If we look at it back from an IT perspective, from IT support, when you're looking at like, how can this help you solve a problem in real time? Like you're walking through this with a customer.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So and I think we saved this one for last because it's probably the most common, but it kind of is a great way to talk about. But, IT tickets, right? I'm on my computer. I was working in this piece of software. It crashed, so immediately what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire in a ticket. I'm the IT support engineer that gets this, right? So ServiceNow's great. It brought it to me, told me who it was. It told me what priority it was. I've got this great interface. I've got a little bit of knowledge base. So there's some knowledge base in ServiceNow that has been built by my peers, and I've searched that a little bit, right? But okay, there was no answer. So what do I do? I'm thinking about okay, I remember that there was some documentation, but I can't remember the site that it is. I remember that I emailed somebody last year about something like this, but I can't remember who that was, right? So now I'm either digging through SharePoint like I used to, going to different sites, trying to find the stuff, or I'm pouring through old emails. If you flip it, right, and come in with an AI-driven search integration, what that search is going to do is it's going to look at all the contextual information that we have. We know who got assigned the ticket. We know who filed the ticket, right? We know what software they were having a problem with and what error they've got. We've already got access to all the SharePoint information. So that document that the ticket owner doesn't remember, well, the AI-driven search knows exactly where it is. So it's offering it up. Hey, by the way, there's a document out here on SharePoint that talks about something very similar. And then because it can index email exchanges, communications, things like that, it can go, here's an email from last year that was similar to this. It can even go even further and say, here's another ticket from that same guy 3 months ago with a very similar problem, right? So then you pop out and go, man, he's had this problem before. And last time, this is what they did to close the ticket. So those things that individually, if you think about the time that that person would have taken, he would have gone over to SharePoint 20, 30 minutes, probably not found it, searched through his email, but probably didn't find it there because it was too far away. Probably maybe didn't think to search old tickets because if you maybe think that if the end user had run into this before, maybe he wouldn't call again, but they always do, right? They don't remember what you did last time. So now, as soon as he opens the ticket, he's got 3 potential solutions right in front of him that the AI-driven search has brought right to his hand. So now I look at those and go, oh yeah, that's exactly the answer. Provide it over to my customer or my fellow employee. He solves this problem, move on. I'm that much more efficient. I'm not frustrated. I'm not emailing somebody going, hey, I can't find anything in SharePoint. We got a real problem here. It really kind of smooths out that whole process, right?
We started this conversation alluding to the BA Insight tool that allows us to integrate this augmentation to ServiceNow. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing to remember is that ServiceNow is a platform. The people who use it, know it. There's great capability to integrate with it. What we've done is integrate in context, right? We've got some great information on our website if people want to check it out. But really, every digitized workflow you have in there can benefit from an AI-driven search improvement, right? So there's the workflow is the workflow, and you're going to take people through it. But pretty much anytime you move from step to step, there's likely information that you need something. Something is needed to move it from that step to the other step. And sometimes they're very simple, right? It's just, when does this need to be done by? 2 weeks. Okay, great. Now we set it today. But sometimes it's not that simple. And what we want to do is focus on anytime we put an employee in a situation where they need to provide information or they need to answer a question or they need to make a decision, right? We want them to not be frustrated. We want them to be happy about the decision and confident in it, right? So I think, what was it that the metric, companies that were on Glassdoor's like best place to work, they outperform the market by almost 116%. Right. So
wow,
that goes back to what we were talking about with the HR benefit. If I can put my company on a great place to work, I'm gonna outpace the market. And the easiest thing to do is make it so that I've got kind of happy employees that are able to find what they need and get their job done, get that work-life balance. Like feel when you're going home for the day, it's like, man, I knocked out 30 tickets today. Boom, boom, boom. Great day. I've signed back up for my benefits. Everything made clear. I'm gonna go buy Steve a cold one after work because he had a great spreadsheet that I was able to find. Those situations all build on that. I'm an engaged and happy employee, going to be a better company, right? And any chance you can get to find someone and impact them in that way with this type of information, putting information at their fingertips, I think is great investment and great things to look at.
What's so intriguing about it to me, just in terms of a final thought that you've provoked here, that the application of AI to cognitive search to a service like this is that it's sort of emergent behavior. Like you don't know on implementation the kinds of benefits that are going to come out of it. You don't know what it's going to surface when somebody needs it because you can't naturally predict every single problem that people are going to bring to it. But that in so many ways is what makes it that much more important, if not magical.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not the things that you can't start with, hey, we're going to go and make it so that everybody can find stuff easier. And like, it's very hard to pitch that solution to somebody. It's like nebulous, right?
Right.
But when you get into something like this and you say, what I'm going to do is in each one of these workflows, I'm going to find a way to predict what they need and provide them better information. It's like, okay, I get that. Right. And it can really pay off.
Finally, I've never created a spreadsheet that has inspired anybody to buy me a drink. So you have just
you need to up your spreadsheet game.
My game is, it's not good. My game is not good. Where would you like to send people to learn a little bit more about this? I know we have a fancy landing page over at bainsight.com.
Yeah, bainsight.com/ServiceNow.
Well, that's easy enough.
It also shows right up on the products. When you go to the landing page, you can read more about it there. And obviously they can always email me or reach out to me, and happy to talk to anybody.
Sean Coleman, thank you so much for your time today. This has been great.
Excellent. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. We appreciate your time and attention. On behalf of Sean Coleman and everybody at BA Insight, I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you next time right here on Shared Insights, the podcast from BA Insight.